Well, the Snyder Cut has finally been released on HBO Max, and it's crazy to know to think that this is finally happening. We finally have the Snyder Cut when people have been asking for the Snyder Cut for how long now? Like years. So, just to give a brief background, people have been asking ever since the original theatrical cut for the Justice League came out. That was directed by Joss Whedon, and people were unsatisfied with it, and they heard rumors about there being this mystical Snyder Cut that exists that apparently is very, very different from the theatrical cut of the Justice League. People have been demanding the release of the Snyder Cut, and it was this massive fan campaign, and there were some things that happened behind the scenes probably that convinced the execs at Warner Brothers to finally put this out, but we finally have it. This is finally something that's actually happened. I can't believe it. The fans had demanded something, and we actually got it. It's not very often that happens, but when it does, it's beautiful. Sometimes it's not worth it. Sometimes it's not what you think it's going to be, but I think this is one of those rare instances when I would have to say it was totally worth it, and what we got was, in my opinion, incredible. So, I mean, that could already tell you what you might want to know about, my general opinion of the Snyder Cut version of the Justice League. So, just to also give you some background on, myself, having not seen the theatrical cut of the Justice League, I didn't really have any idea, I did know the gist of what happens in the original Justice League movie that was released before the Snyder Cut, so I kind of knew what I was getting myself into, but I didn't know all the specifics, so I watched this with a friend, and I had to ask him, whenever certain scenes happened, was this in the original theatrical cut, or was this not in the theatrical cut? How did this happen in the theatrical cut? So I really just had to go to him for a context, or just to clarify, if this is new, or if this is something that was changed, because otherwise I'd be pretty lost as to what scenes were there in the original version and what scenes were different. Right out the gate, before I even go into the plot and all that, visually the movie is different. I did do some research on this. In the original theatrical cut, the colors are generally much more vivid. The colors, they're much more vivid, they're brighter. And the Snyder Cut, all the colors have been very much muted. They're very dull, and I think that's intentional that he's doing that because the movie does generally have a much darker tone, and especially in comparison to the original theatrical cut of the movie. So it kind of makes sense that Snyder wanted to kind of tone the colors down a little bit. I wish we kind of would have maybe something, some sort of a happy medium where some colors are a little bit more vivid, and then you can still have your muted colors, but some scenes maybe will be a little bit more vivid and bright in comparison to some other scenes which are maybe a little bit more muted. But unfortunately, we just have the whole movie that looks like that, and it's fine. It looks fine visually for the most part. It's just that in comparison to some of the scenes I was seeing when doing my research on how different the theatrical cut looked, I was a little bit disappointed because I'm like, that actually looks kind of good. The only thing that's bad about it is the unfinished CG, because when the theatrical cut came out, there's a lot of unfinished CG that was in the original theatrical version of the Justice League. Fortunately, the Snyder Cut fixes a lot of that. The CG looks fine for the most part. It is actually a finished product in comparison to Justice League, because as far as I know, there was a lot of production issues behind the scenes, and that movie was pretty much rushed out the door. We don't get that sense with this movie, however. We definitely get the sense that this movie, Snyder took his time and to, craft everything to what, at least in his opinion, was perfection, and put it out. So, it wasn't rushed. He took his time with it, and you can tell. One other thing I should address about the visuals. The entire movie is shown in a 4:3 aspect ratio. So what does that mean? That means there's black bars on both sides of the screen. And at first I was confused when I was seeing the trailers for the Snyder Cut because they were all in this aspect ratio. And I was like, why exactly is this in 4:3? Apparently, that's because of IMAX, like because of the aspect ratio, I guess, that typically movies are shown in an IMAX or something. I don't know, but to me, it doesn't make any sense because most people are going to be watching this at home. This is going to be released on HBO Max exclusively. So why is this entire movie in a 4:3 aspect ratio? So maybe some people might have some kind of home IMAX theater screen, but how many people out of everybody actually has like an IMAX screen in their house? Mostly rich people, I'm assuming. Probably Zack Snyder has an IMAX screen in his house, but most people don't have that. So to release this entire movie and have it in a 4:3 aspect ratio just doesn't make sense. I don't know why this is not in just widescreen, but when I was watching it, it's something that I just eventually got used to. It was annoying at first, but you get used to it as the film goes on. Some people might not be able to, but I know personally, it didn't bother me after a while. It was just confusing. So anyways, Justice League. The premise for this movie is pretty similar to the original theatrical version of the Justice League. We have the main villain being Steppenwolf. Steppenwolf is trying to find all these the three mother boxes. I will have to say I'm not as familiar with the DC lore as I am with from what we've seen from the Marvel stuff with Infinity War, and basically what I took away from what the mother boxes kind of are is that they're very similar to like the Infinity Stones from the Infinity Gauntlet storyline where Thanos is trying to get a hold of those. This seemed very, very similar to where, Steppenwolf is trying to get a hold of the mother boxes in order for to unify them, and then when he unifies the mother boxes, then that creates an interdimensional portal where Darkseid can come through and invade, basically. And that's not much of a spoiler. I did say this is going to be a spoiler-free review. Everybody who's seen the trailers knows Darkseid's in this, so that's not a spoiler to say Darkseid's in this. But yeah, aside from the Darkseid thing, the general plot is pretty similar, obviously, with more connections to Darkseid and his overall master plan. But the general story with Steppenwolf going around collecting the mother boxes is still there, albeit very, 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 very different things happen, but that idea is still the main driving force, of the plot in this movie. The Justice League has, Bruce Wayne is going around recruiting Flash, Cyborg, Wonder Woman, and trying to resurrect Superman, basically, so that he can form the Justice League and try to take down Steppenwolf and stop him from unifying the mother boxes. And but I will say that plot might not have been as clear in the theatrical cut of the movie, because the gist I'm getting from people who have seen the theatrical cut is that they weren't entirely sure what Steppenwolf was doing and why certain characters were like doing certain things in certain parts of the movie. Why are they in this place? Why is this character here? What is their motivation? How they get from A to B? Basically, all of that there's no context for it, and it just happens. Like, somebody will be here 1 minute, and then the next minute, that character is going to be over here. Well, in this movie, we have all the context and more for what is going on, so the plot is very, very clear. We actually understand what is happening and within the plot. So that's definitely a huge plus. So one thing... there are a lot of things I actually really liked about this movie. First of all, this movie is rated R in comparison to the theatrical cut. Zack Snyder went all out with this movie. This is also the case with Batman v Superman, the Ultimate Edition, which is also rated R, and I'm pretty sure Zack Snyder went a little bit further with the violence in that one. But this is something I'm just not really seeing a lot of people talk about. This movie, it's not the most graphic thing I've ever seen, but it's pretty brutal for a superhero movie. And this is one thing I definitely like about DC over Marvel. They're not afraid to really, or at least, current Marvel, like the Disney-owned Marvel, the MCU. DC is not afraid to go there. At least Zack Snyder is not afraid to go there. Because it seems, when you give Zack Snyder creative control, he will just have more brutal violence. So in this movie, you're seeing people getting killed in some pretty horrific ways. Like some guy gets his head smashed against a wall. There's quite a bit more blood, not just with the human characters, but also with the parademons. The parademons are just bleed out a lot more, and there's a lot more, like, there's some decapitations. I think there are some parademons getting their body cut in half. I think there are some people also getting their bodies cut in half. So everything is definitely a lot more violent. I like that. I like when things are just really brutal, dark, and edgy, and Zack Snyder is that kind of guy. He likes to just make everything as dark and edgy as possible. Now there's dark and edgy for no reason, and then there's dark and edgy and, where it actually makes sense for it to be really dark and and brutal. Here it kind of makes sense considering the stakes of what's going on, and just how brutal the enemies you're fighting are. It totally makes sense why the movie goes that direction. Here I think it makes sense, and Zack Snyder, mostly for that reason, seems to be a very love or hate director. People either love Zack Snyder's work or they really, really hate Zack Snyder because either like he misunderstood the DC characters, like Superman for instance, or it's just way too dark and edgy and they don't like that. I find myself somewhere in the middle here. I think Zack Snyder, he is a decent director. Sometimes he's a little bit too much. Sometimes I just don't like some things he's done. But then there are other times where he can be really, really good, especially if he's given, actually given more creative freedom. And here he's definitely given a lot more creative freedom. So the action scenes and generally the violence is just much more intense. One thing I will say that is a little bit of a middle thing for me is the action scenes. There's a lot of slow-mo being used, and I saw a lot of people online complaining about the slow-mo. There's too much slow-mo. For me, I didn't really mind the slow-mo scenes. I thought that maybe it was a little bit excessive at times, but I didn't really mind it too much. The general fight scenes were definitely pretty good. I don't know, I can't compare it to the original theatrical cut, but for the most part, the action scenes were great. The slow-mo was a little distracting at times, and some, at certain points it's cool and it makes sense, like with the scenes with the Flash, but in other points in the movie it feels like, okay, does this really need to be slowed down? But it's not something that really detracted from the experience to me. So this movie also, I should point out, it's 4 hours long, so people might be turned off by that. I hear a lot of people online saying stuff like, I had to take breaks, it was too long, it was just a little bit over bloated. So I should explain why this movie is 4 hours long. In the original movie, we have characters that we do not have solo movies for, like with the MCU. Before they did the Avengers, of course, as everybody might know, all the characters, or most of them at least, had solo films to introduce those characters, so we pretty much knew who everybody was. Here, we maybe know who, like, a few of these characters are, even Aquaman, but at the time, it was even worse for the theatrical version of Justice League because we didn't even know who Aquaman was yet, because his movie hadn't even come out yet, so we don't know who Aquaman is. In this movie, they basically give backstory and more information for every character in this movie. They give more, especially Cyborg. Cyborg is like the standout. Cyborg is the one they give the most characterization to, because apparently in the original movie, we didn't even get to see his father. We see his father in this movie. We understand his motivations. We understand, like, because in the original movie, he was apparently all just kind of emo for no reason, according to my friend. Here, it kind of makes sense why he's sort of like that, but you understand why, and he's not just like an asshole or anything like that, like the way he was described by my friend in some scenes in the original movie. They cut those scenes out, or they changed them, so it makes more sense, like, why he's acting certain ways. But he didn't come off that way in this movie. He came off more as like, he was a team player, but he had his own problems, and he had his own reasons for why he was acting certain ways because of what happened in his past and how he became like who he was. You felt worse for him because they actually go into why he is a cyborg and what role his father played in that, and kind of the relationship he had with his father as well. And it was just like a lot of scenes are dedicated to Cyborg, so he's probably the most developed character in this movie out of the Justice League. They give some more backstory to for Aquaman, even though we already kind of know most everything we need to know about Aquaman from the Aquaman movie. But in the Justice League, they actually semi-explain some things, such as, you know, his relationship with his half brother, and his kind of bitterness towards the Kingdom of Atlantis, and then there's some brief conversations between him and Mira that kind of expand on that. And we also get more backstory with the Flash about how his father's in prison and how he's he's trying to become like a lawyer. He's trying to get involved at get a legal degree or something so he can become a lawyer, and potentially just so he can get his dad out of prison. And they go more into that, and they also give Flash more to do. That's another thing too. Not only do they give these characters more backstory, they give each character a purpose. Each character has something to do in this movie. The Flash being one of those characters that I heard in the original theatrical cut, there wasn't much for him to do. He was just the fast guy. You know, he didn't actually have important things to do. Here, there are actually important things the Flash does. Literally, at one point, I will not spoil it, but doing something that literally saved the world. Let's just say that. I won't say anything else. I feel like they utilized the 4 hours, very, very well. Like, it didn't feel like they wasted a lot of time. I thought that, honestly, I was going to watch this movie, and my main complaint was going to be, this movie was too long. It was over bloated. It felt like, it didn't need to be 4 hours. And some scenes, I kind of would say that for some. They're the only scenes I could think of that you could cut out are the scenes with Lois being depressed. But it doesn't take up too much time. So if you cut that out, you're really not cutting too much of the film. So for the most part, I feel like that 4 hours is utilized very well. I was almost tempted to say the movie is slow-paced, but it doesn't feel that way. Like, I seriously watched this movie, and I just felt like I was entertained the whole time, and I didn't feel the 4 hours. Like I said earlier, I know a lot of people were talking online about taking breaks. Me and my friend watched this, and we never took any breaks. Like, he maybe got up once to go take a leak, and then that's the only break we took, and that took maybe like a couple minutes. But we watched the rest of the movie, and it was great. We didn't really feel like bored at all. It didn't feel like it was too long for what it was. The only thing that people might have complaints about is the epilogue portion. The epilogue portion is 20 minutes long, but it also, the epilogue portion, I feel like it does have a purpose. People are saying, why is this here? What is this doing here? This feels like it's unnecessary. I disagree. I think what the point of that was the epilogue is a lot of setup. It's setting up what Snyder wanted to do with the DCEU, probably, and what he wanted to do with Justice League going forward. I think that's what the epilogue was. So you're going to get a lot of setup with the epilogue. And it sucks because, unfortunately, the future of Zack Snyder's version of the DCEU is very much uncertain, or it might just never happen. So, I mean, it's cool that we got this, but it also kind of, it's very much a bittersweet victory. Like, we got the Snyder Cut, but what we probably don't have is the future of what Zack Snyder was going to do. Because in a lot of ways, this movie feels like everything that Snyder wanted to do with the DCEU sort of condensed into one movie. Because not only is there a lot of stuff with the character development for the individual heroes of the Justice League, but there's a lot of ideas in this movie that you can definitely feel like it's this is something that Snyder was going to do in the future, especially the stuff with Darkseid. There is a lot of stuff with which is implying that Darkseid is going to have a major role in the future movies, very similar to, of course, Thanos. And it was definitely being set up in this movie a lot. There was a lot of setup, not just in the epilogue, but also within the movie itself. There's a lot of setup for other things. And it sucks because I'm one of those people who wants to see like what else is going to come out of this. After it was over, I mean, you would think with a 4-hour runtime, you're like, oh, I'm glad that's over, right? You know, it's like maybe it was good, but it was too long or whatever. No, I wanted more. I don't know about everybody else. I still wanted more. I was like, that's really fucking cool. What's going to happen with this? I want to see what they're going to do. But it sucks. And herein lies the bittersweet part of it. It's just like, we have all this cool stuff. We finally have, like, in my opinion, the definitive version of this movie. But that's all we're really going to get. Like, you know, I don't know if we're ever going to get anything else from Snyder going forward in the DCEU. This might be the end of it, guys. It sucks because technically this is supposed to be, it feels like this is supposed to be the beginning of something epic, but it's also, really, it's just the end, which is really a shame. So I should speak on something else, and it's not a spoiler either because we knew this was happening. It was already in one of the trailers, so it's not a spoiler. Jared Leto's Joker. I was also really looking forward to this scene. I will say the scene happens pretty much at the very end of the movie, but it's nonetheless pretty good. I didn't see Suicide Squad, but what I saw from Suicide Squad of Jared Leto's Joker in Suicide Squad, I was not a fan. I like his look here. His look is definitely an improvement. I will definitely agree with some people online where they said they did not like the laugh. Not a fan of the laugh. I really don't care for it. I think Joaquin Phoenix did a better version of that, of the laugh. It was more unsettling. Here, it's just kind of silly, and you can't take it too seriously. I like the look, though. I do really like I'm digging the look. And his performance as Joker is definitely much more toned down in comparison to what he was going for with the character in Suicide Squad. He's not going for that same personality in this, it seems. It seems this seems much different. I can't put my finger on what exactly he's going for. It's more like, it seems more like classic Joker, where he's just trying to play mind games with Bruce. He's just trying to, like, you know, kind of pour salt on his wound, metaphorically. You know, he's trying to dig up things from his past and, you know, and trying to mess with him, basically. Sort of like trying to antagonize Batman into pretty much killing him. And I will say that another thing regarding Batman, for those of you who did not like Batman in Batman v Superman, you're not going to like Batman in this either because, well, he's not as angry and vengeful, of course, in this one for obvious reasons, as he was in Batman v Superman. But there's still kind of that aspect to him where the whole thing with him potentially, you know, kind of killing people or threatening to kill people, that's still kind of a thing in this, unfortunately. And I'm not really sure how I feel about the idea of Batman killing people. I don't think Batman should kill people. It's been established in many different stories, even the Elseworld stories. The Batman is no killer. And I like that idea. I like that idea that Batman, despite how all the shit he's had to put up with, he never crosses that line. Here, it seems like he's completely forgone that. I don't know. But that's the kind of Batman we're getting here. I don't really care too much for that aspect of the character, but other than that, I thought at least Ben Affleck's performance as Batman, his portrayal of the character was fine. I think he does fit Batman. I think he at least looks the part of Bruce Wayne. I think everything else about his portrayal of Batman is fine. I like the suit. I like, you know, the voice modulation isn't too over the top like it was in the Christopher Nolan movies. That was one of the things I kind of didn't care too much for with the Christopher Nolan interpretation of the character. And all the other characters are good too. The only thing, I'm not a huge fan of Ezra Miller. I don't mind his Flash. I think his Flash is a pretty accurate portrayal of how Flash was, from what I understand. I'm not a huge into Flash, so I can't really say how accurate it is, but from what at least from things I've seen from Flash in the TV shows and video games and then some of the comics, it seemed pretty accurate. The only thing I didn't like from the original movie, from what I saw of it, was that he's just, all his character was in that movie was comic relief and not much else. Here, yeah, he spouts jokes, but he can be serious at times when he needs to be serious. So I just thank you for that, Zack Snyder. Thank you for that, because I think there needs to be a balance. There shouldn't be a character who's just all the time cracking jokes, just being a comedian. I'd rather that there's a balance where sometimes, yeah, he can joke, and then other times, when he needs to be, he can be serious. But yeah, I don't really want to go too deep into like the characters and hence, unless I unfortunately I accidentally give away spoilers or something. But let me just say this. I should also mention one other thing about because I've gone over the visuals, I've gone over sort of the basic story, and the characters, character development, and what Zack Snyder was trying to do with this movie. There's also the soundtrack. And this is something else that people kind of have some gripes with. They think that they're at some points the soundtrack, the music was a little bit misplaced. Like it was too much. Like when Wonder Woman or the Amazons would show up, they'd always have this one track that played. There was like just this chanting. I thought it was fine. I know what Zack was trying to do. He was trying to make everything seem epic. But I will concede at some points, some of the soundtrack choices were a little bit weird. It seemed a bit out of place. If I'm trying to nitpick stuff, I would say, yeah, maybe at some scenes it was a little bit too much. Same thing with the slow-mo. A little bit too overindulgent with that, but it's fine. Like, I honestly, and I don't know who made this comment, but somebody online said, I want to see, it would be so interesting to see, like a world where directors were just given free reign to do what they want. And even if it turns out a bad movie, I want to see the director's vision more than just a movie which has very heavily, has the studio very heavily involved and is kind of putting their director on a metaphorical leash where they can't do as much. And I completely agree. I want to see more movies like this one where the director, they can just go all out. Just give us what your vision is, no matter if it's going to be bad, it doesn't matter. I just want to see what this movie would be like if, the director's just given full creative freedom. And, I agree. Some directors, they shouldn't have that. Some directors, they do need to be reined in at times because it's just this is too much. But then but then sometimes I'm like, I just want to see it. I just want to, just go crazy, and I think this movie was fantastic, honestly. I was already kind of had my mind made up before I watched this that I was probably going to give this a 7, based on what a lot of people were saying in early reviews. I think this is more like an 8. I don't want to say a 9 because there are definitely problems, I definitely think the movie still has its fair share of problems, so I don't want to say that this movie is like a masterpiece, but it was a great movie. It was a good time. This is one of probably the best movie I've seen so far this year. I mean, that's not saying much because we haven't, because of the pandemic, haven't gotten that many movies this year, especially not many movies that I would say, oh, this is the best thing I've seen this year. But so far, this is the best movie I have seen this year. I just wish I know why it can't be in theaters, but at the same time, I wish it was. I mean, just imagine if this were actually on the big screen. If this actually were in IMAX, like Zack Snyder intended. But, we can watch it at home right now. I highly recommend this movie. Unfortunately, right now, the only way you can watch it is on HBO Max. Hopefully, in the future, we can maybe get a physical release. Maybe get a Blu-ray and a 4K release of the movie. I will throw money at that. But until that day comes, this is the only way we can watch the movie, and it is a damn good time. I definitely intend to rewatch this a few times. It doesn't matter that it's 4 hours long. This is an experience. I will say that. This is an experience. So, let me know what you guys thought of the movie. This is probably the first cinematic chaos or the first, movie review I've really done in a while. Let me know what you think of the new camera angle. Let me know what you think of this format. But yeah, or let me know what movie you want me to review next. I kind of just do these on a whim. Whenever there's a movie I really want to talk about, I'll review it. But if you have any recommendations, definitely let me know. And until next time, I will see you all later.